The embossed invitation to Riverside High's 20-year reunion sat on Owen Fletcher's mahogany desk for nearly a month before Bethany, his personal assistant, finally confronted him about it. She placed the cream-colored card directly in his line of sight during their Monday morning briefing, her expression leaving no room for negotiation. "You need to go," Bethany said firmly, crossing her arms. "When's the last time you did something that wasn't a board meeting or a business acquisition?" Owen leaned back in his leather chair, studying the invitation as if it were a contract with hidden clauses. At 45, he'd built a technology empire from scratch, creating software that revolutionized inventory management for retail companies worldwide. His net worth had recently crossed $400 million, but the thought of returning to his hometown filled him with an uncomfortable mixture of pride and anxiety. "I barely knew anyone back then," Owen protested, running his fingers through his salt and pepper hair. "I spent every lunch period in the computer lab. Who's going to remember the nerdy kid who coded during gym class?" Bethany smiled knowingly. "That nerdy kid is now featured in Forbes and Business Insider. Trust me, they'll remember you now." That was precisely what bothered him, but Owen found himself agreeing nonetheless. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe a small part of him wanted validation for the awkward teenager he'd been. Returning to Riverside. 2 weeks later, Owen drove his Tesla through Riverside's main street, noting how the town had changed yet remained fundamentally the same. The old theater had been converted into a boutique hotel where he'd booked a suite, but the library still stood on the corner, and Murphy's Diner still advertised its famous apple pie on a weathered sign. The reunion was held at the Riverside Country Club, a venue that had seemed impossibly elegant when he was 18 but now felt modest compared to the five-star hotels where he typically stayed. Owen adjusted his tailored navy suit and stepped inside, immediately overwhelmed by the sounds of laughter and conversation. "Owen Fletcher. Oh my goodness, is that really you?" A woman wearing a name tag that read "Reunion Committee" rushed toward him, her eyes wide with recognition. "We're so honored you came. Everyone's been talking about your company. You're practically a celebrity." Owen smiled politely, accepting the name tag she thrust into his hands. Within minutes, he was surrounded by former classmates, most of whom he barely remembered. They peppered him with questions about his business, his homes, his lifestyle. It felt more like a networking event than a reunion, and he found himself gravitating toward the bar. An unexpected conversation. That's when he noticed her. She stood near the windows overlooking the golf course, engaged in animated conversation with a small group. She wore a burgundy dress that complemented her auburn hair, which fell in natural waves past her shoulders. There was something magnetic about her presence, not flashy or attention-seeking, but genuine and warm. Her laughter carried across the room, authentic and unrestrained. "Who is that?" Owen asked the bartender, nodding toward her. "That's Jade Morrison," replied Trevor Banks, appearing beside him with a beer. Owen vaguely remembered Trevor from their chemistry class. "She owns the Reading Nook, that bookstore on Maple Avenue. She was in our graduating class, man. Quiet girl, always volunteering in the library." Owen frowned, trying to place her in his memory, but came up blank. "I don't remember her." "Not surprising," Trevor chuckled. "You were always laser-focused on your coding projects. But she's different now, confident, successful in her own way. That bookstore of hers has become the heart of downtown." Owen found himself drawn across the room, weaving through clusters of conversations until he stood at the edge of Jade's group. She was describing a recent book club meeting that had devolved into a hilarious debate about whether the protagonist should have chosen love or career. And then Mrs. Patterson stood up and declared that the entire premise was flawed because the character could have both if she'd just planned better, Jade said, her eyes sparkling with amusement. She proceeded to outline a 5-year plan for the fictional character while we all just stared. Her audience laughed, and Owen found himself smiling too. When Jade turned and noticed him standing there, her expression shifted, recognition, surprise, and something more complex flickered across her face. Hello, she said, extending her hand. Owen Fletcher, right? Welcome back to Riverside. Her hand was warm and her grip confident. Jade Morrison, Owen replied, feeling slightly off balance. Trevor tells me you own a bookstore now. The Reading Nook, she confirmed. It's my pride and joy, though I'm sure it seems small compared to your tech empire. What struck Owen was that she said it without bitterness or envy, just a simple statement of fact. Actually, I'd love to hear about it, he said, surprising himself with his sincerity. A connection forms. They talked for over an hour, oblivious to the reunion swirling around them. Jade was articulate and thoughtful, with a dry wit that kept catching him off guard. She asked about his work, but not in the way others had. She wanted to know about the challenges of innovation, the philosophy behind his business model, the moments of doubt he'd faced. I have to confess something, Owen said finally. I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember you from high school. Jade's smile was understanding rather than hurt. We weren't friends. I was the library volunteer who helped you find that advanced programming book for your senior project. You thanked me, grabbed the book, and that was our only conversation in 4 years. The casual way she said it made Owen's chest tighten with unexpected regret. I was pretty single-minded back then. You were driven, she corrected gently. And it clearly paid off. Though I hope you've learned to look up from your computer screen occasionally. Her teasing tone made him laugh. I'm working on it. In fact, I'm looking up right now, and I'm wondering if I could visit your bookstore tomorrow. I'd like to see what you've built. Jade's eyebrows rose in surprise. You want to see my little bookstore? I want to continue this conversation, Owen said honestly. And I'm genuinely curious about what makes someone choose books over bytes in the digital age. A slow smile spread across her face, and Owen felt something shift inside him, a stirring of something he hadn't felt in years. We open at 9, Jade said. Fair warning, though, I'll probably try to sell you some books. I'll take that risk, Owen replied, already looking forward to the morning. Owen arrived at the Reading Nook at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the artisan cafe down the street. The storefront was charming, with large windows displaying carefully arranged book collections and a hand-painted sign that read, "Find your next adventure here." The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and Owen found himself genuinely impressed. The interior was warm and inviting, with exposed brick walls, vintage lighting fixtures, and shelves arranged to create intimate reading spaces. A section for children featured a small castle structure with cushions, and a cozy corner near the window had armchairs that looked perfect for losing oneself in a good story. You came, Jade's voice came from behind a rolling ladder where she was shelving books. She wore jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and Owen thought she looked even more beautiful than she had the night before. With better coffee, as promised, he said, offering her a cup. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Owen felt an unexpected spark of electricity. From the way Jade's eyes widened slightly, she felt it too. Learning her story. Welcome to my kingdom, Jade said with a self-deprecating laugh, gesturing around the shop. All 1,200 square feet of it. It's wonderful, Owen said, meaning it. How long have you owned it? 10 years this December, Jade replied, leading him through the store. This used to be an old hardware store. When I bought it, the roof leaked, the floors were warped, and everyone told me I was crazy to open an independent bookstore in the age of online shopping. As she showed him around, Owen could see the love and thought she'd poured into every detail. Handwritten recommendation cards were tucked into various books, each one personalized and thoughtful. A bulletin board displayed photos of book club meetings, children's story hours, and author events. Every Saturday morning, we have story time, Jade explained, pointing to the castle structure. Last week we had 53 kids. The fire marshal definitely noticed we were over capacity, but he's over capacity, but he's a regular customer, so he just suggested we move to the community center next time. Owen laughed. You've created something special here. I can see why you love it. They settled into the armchairs by the window with their coffee. Jade occasionally rose to help customers who trickled in, and Owen found himself content to simply watch her work. She knew every customer by name, remembered their preferences, and had an uncanny ability to recommend exactly the right book. A painful revelation. When the morning rush slowed, Jade returned to her chair, studying him with those perceptive brown eyes. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. "Anything. Do you remember the day you asked me for help finding that programming book?" Owen shook his head, feeling a familiar pang of regret. "I'm sorry, I don't." "I thought not," Jade said, her tone gentle rather than accusatory. "It was February of senior year. You were working on your project about artificial intelligence, ahead of your time, really. I helped you find 3 different books from the reference section. You were so excited when you saw them that you thanked me and rushed off without even asking my name." She paused, taking a sip of her coffee. "The next day, I saw you in the hallway and smiled, but you looked right through me. It happened a few more times before I realized you genuinely didn't recognize me outside the library context." Owen felt his stomach drop. "Jade, Don't apologize," she interrupted, holding up her hand. "You weren't cruel or dismissive. You were just so focused on your goals that you didn't see the people around you. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. I'm telling you because I want you to understand something." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Last night, when you walked over to me at the reunion, I recognized you immediately. And my first thought was, I wonder if he's changed. Because the Owen I remember was brilliant and driven, but he was also alone. Always alone. And I wondered if success had made you even more isolated." Seeing clearly. Her words hit Owen with unexpected force. He thought about his life, the luxury apartments he owned but never felt at home in, the business associates he called friends but didn't actually know, the constant travel that left him exhausted but too restless to stop. "You're right," he said quietly. "I've been so focused on building my company that I've forgotten to build a life. My sister Nina told me the same thing last year, but I didn't really hear her." "And now?" Jade asked. "Now I'm sitting in a bookstore in my hometown, having the most honest conversation I've had in years with someone who saw through me 20 years ago." Owen met her eyes. "I think I'm finally ready to listen." Jade smiled. "Good. Because I have a proposition for you." "I'm listening." "Have lunch with me. Not at some fancy restaurant where everyone will stare at the Millionaire. Come to my house. I'll make sandwiches, and we can talk like normal people. No business talk, no reunion nostalgia. Just 2 people getting to know each other." Owen felt something crack open in his chest, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the coffee and everything to do with the woman across from him. "I'd like that very much," he said. Lunch and laughter. Jade's house was a small cottage 3 blocks from the bookstore, painted cheerful yellow with flower boxes in the windows. The interior was exactly what Owen expected, walls lined with bookshelves, comfortable furniture that invited you to curl up and read, and personal touches that made it feel like a home rather than a showcase. They sat at her kitchen table, eating turkey sandwiches and homemade potato salad while rain began to patter against the windows. Jade told him about her journey from being a painfully shy teenager to finding her voice through teaching high school English, then taking the terrifying leap to open her own business. "My parents thought I was insane," she admitted. "I had a stable teaching job with benefits and a pension. Why would I risk it all on a bookstore? But I'd spent years helping other people find their voices through literature. I wanted to create a space where books could change lives the way they changed mine." "What changed your life?" Owen asked. Jade got up and retrieved a worn paperback from her living room. "This one. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 12, right after my parents' divorce. I was angry and confused, but reading about Francie Nolan, this girl who found beauty and hope in difficult circumstances, it helped me see that my story wasn't over. It was just beginning. She handed him the book, and Owen could see the cracked spine, the dog-eared pages, the notes written in the margins in teenage handwriting. "This is why I do what I do," Jade continued. "Because somewhere in Riverside, there's a kid who needs their version of this book. And if my store can connect them with it, then all the financial struggles and long hours are worth it." Owen looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. Here was someone who had chosen meaning over money, connection over conquest. And she seemed happier than anyone he knew. "Jade," he said slowly, "would you have dinner with me tonight? A proper date." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing something in her mind. "Owen, let's be honest with each other," she finally said. "You're a millionaire who flies around the world closing deals and changing industries. I sell books in a small town and consider it a victory when we break even for the month. Your life is in boardrooms and first-class cabins. Mine is here, in this little town you couldn't wait to leave. What exactly are we doing?" "I don't know," Owen admitted. "But I know that I haven't felt this present, this alive, in years. You asked earlier if I've changed. I think I'm starting to." Jade's expression softened. "Okay then. Dinner. But I'm choosing the place, and it won't be fancy." "Perfect," Owen said, meaning it completely. Jade chose Luigi's, a family-owned Italian restaurant that had been a Riverside institution for 40 years. The walls were covered with photos of customers spanning decades, and the aroma of garlic and tomato sauce filled the air. Owen couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten somewhere so unpretentious, and he found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. Over pasta and red wine, their conversation deepened. Jade asked about the moments that shaped his business philosophy, and Owen found himself describing things he rarely discussed: the fear of failure that drove him, the loneliness of being at the top, the nagging sense that he'd achieved everything he'd set out to do but somehow missed the point. "Do you know what the hardest part of success is?" Owen asked, swirling his wine thoughtfully. "It's realizing that arriving at your destination doesn't feel the way you imagined it would. I thought making my first million would change everything. Then it was 10 million, then 100. But each milestone just revealed another mountain to climb." Jade listened with those perceptive eyes, not rushing to fill the silence. Finally, she said, "That's because you've been measuring success by subtraction." "What do you mean?" "You've been subtracting problems from your life," she explained. "Poverty, obscurity, powerlessness. Each success eliminated something you didn't want. But happiness doesn't come from subtraction. It comes from addition, adding meaning, adding connection, adding purpose that matters beyond yourself." Owen sat back, struck by the simple wisdom of her words. "How did you get so wise?" "Years of reading philosophy while eating ramen noodles and wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake buying a bookstore," Jade laughed. "Wisdom is cheaper than business school." Honest confessions. As dessert arrived, tiramisu they agreed to share, Jade's expression grew more serious. "Owen, I need to tell you something," she said, setting down her fork. "I had such a crush on you in high school." Owen blinked in surprise. "You did?" "Massive," she admitted, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "You were this brilliant, focused guy who knew exactly what he wanted. I was invisible to you, but I'd watch you in the library, completely absorbed in your coding books or your science projects. You had this intensity that fascinated me." "I wish I'd noticed," Owen said softly. "I'm glad you didn't," Jade said, surprising him. "Because that crush was about the idea of you, the smart, ambitious boy with big dreams. If we'd dated back then, it probably would have been a disaster. We were both too young, too unformed. But now—" She trailed off, meeting his eyes. "Now?" Owen prompted, his heart beating faster. Now we're both fully ourselves. I know who I am and what I want from life. And you're at a crossroads, figuring out what comes after you've achieved everything you thought you wanted. She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. The question is, what do you want now? Owen looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of her touch, and knew his answer with absolute certainty. I want more nights like this, he said. More conversations that make me think. More time with someone who sees me, really sees me, not just my bank account or business empire. I want to figure out what adding instead of subtracting looks like. Jade smiled, but there was caution in her eyes. You live in San Francisco. Your company headquarters is there. Your life is there. I live here, and I'm not leaving my bookstore. So how does this work? A radical decision. Owen was quiet for a long moment, but his mind was racing. The logical part of him, the part that had built a tech empire, was already running calculations, seeing possibilities others might miss. What if, he said slowly, I didn't have to choose between them? What do you mean? My company is entirely digital. I have an excellent executive team that handles day-to-day operations. I spend most of my time on strategic planning and investor relations, which I can do from anywhere with a good internet connection. Owen felt excitement building as the idea took shape. What if I split my time? I could maintain an apartment in San Francisco for when I need to be at headquarters, but make Riverside my primary residence. Jade's eyes widened. Owen, that's crazy. You can't upend your entire life because of a few days with someone you barely know. You're right that we barely know each other yet, Owen agreed. But I know how I feel when I'm with you. And I know that my life in San Francisco, for all its success, feels hollow. Maybe this is the universe telling me it's time for something different. Or maybe it's the wine talking, Jade said, but he could see hope flickering in her expression. Let me prove it's not, Owen said. I was planning to fly back to San Francisco tomorrow. Instead, let me stay for another week. No pressure, no expectations. Just spend time with me. Let me see what life in Riverside could be like. If it doesn't feel right, I'll go back to my regularly scheduled life with no hard feelings. And if it does feel right? Owen squeezed her hand. Then we take it one day at a time and see where this goes. Building something new. Owen extended his stay from 1 week to 2, then to 3. He set up a temporary office in the corner of Jade's bookstore, and she teased him about being her most consistent customer, even if he only bought coffee and occasionally helped customers find books. But something remarkable began to happen. As Owen immersed himself in the rhythm of small-town life, he found his perspective shifting. He started joining Jade for her Saturday morning story times, watching her bring characters to life for wide-eyed children. He helped her reorganize her inventory system, applying his tech expertise to solve some of her operational challenges without changing what made the store special. In return, Jade taught him to slow down. They took evening walks through Riverside, and she showed him the town through her eyes, the park where she did her best thinking, the coffee shop where local artists displayed their work, the community center where she taught free literacy classes twice a month. You know what I've realized? Owen said one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. I've been so focused on scaling up, on growth and expansion, that I forgot there's value in going deep instead of wide. You've created something in this town that matters to people. It's not about reaching millions, it's about truly impacting the hundreds you do reach. Jade leaned her head on his shoulder. Are you telling me I've corrupted the mighty tech titan with small-town values? You've reminded me what I was actually building toward all along, Owen corrected. I got so caught up in the game of business that I forgot the point was to create something meaningful. The proposal. 3 months later, Owen called a meeting with his executive team to announce his decision. He would remain as CEO but would restructure his role to allow for remote work. More significantly, he was investing $10 million to establish a technology incubator in Riverside, a place where small-town entrepreneurs could access the resources and mentorship typically only available in Silicon Valley. The goal isn't to turn Riverside into the next tech hub, Owen explained to the local newspaper reporter covering the story. It's to prove that you don't have to abandon your roots to pursue innovation. I spent 20 years believing success meant leaving this town behind. I was wrong. The tech incubator opened in a renovated building next to the Reading Nook, creating a symbiotic relationship between traditional and modern businesses. Jade's bookstore became the informal gathering place for entrepreneurs who needed a break from coding, and she curated a business section that became surprisingly popular. More importantly, Owen and Jade built a life together. They kept their own spaces. Owen bought and renovated a house 2 blocks from Jade's cottage, but spent most evenings together, cooking dinner, reading, talking about their days. The reunion. 1 year after that fateful reunion, Owen and Jade found themselves back at the Riverside Country Club for an anniversary celebration of their graduating class. But this time, everything was different. Owen held Jade's hand as they walked in, and he realized he felt none of the anxiety from the previous year. He wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. He was simply there with the woman he loved, in the town he'd learned to call home again. "Look at you two," Trevor Banks said, approaching with a grin. "From not remembering each other to being the most talked about couple in Riverside. How does it feel to be local celebrities?" "Exhausting," Jade joked. "I can't buy groceries without someone asking about our relationship status." "Which is?" Trevor pressed. Owen and Jade exchanged a look, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. Owen reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Actually, we were planning to announce this tonight," Owen said, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Jade Morrison finally agreed to marry me. It only took 4 proposals. I wanted to make sure he was serious," Jade laughed, slipping the ring on her finger. "You can't trust these tech millionaires. They're impulsive." As their former classmates gathered around to congratulate them, Owen felt a profound sense of peace. He'd spent 20 years chasing a version of success that left him empty. It took returning to the place he'd left behind and noticing the girl he'd once overlooked to discover what success actually meant. It wasn't about wealth or recognition or building an empire. It was about finding someone who challenged you to be better, creating work that mattered, and building a life in a place that felt like home. Owen looked at Jade, her face glowing with happiness as she showed off her ring to former classmates, and thought about how different his life might have been if he'd noticed her 20 years ago. But maybe the timing was perfect. Maybe they both needed those 20 years to become the people who could appreciate what they'd found. "What are you thinking?" Jade asked, catching his gaze. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am that my assistant made me come to this reunion," Owen said, pulling her close. "And how grateful I am that you gave the oblivious tech nerd a second chance." "Third chance, technically," Jade corrected with a grin. "But who's counting?" As they swayed to the music, Owen reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought him here. He'd left Riverside as a determined teenager with dreams of conquering the world. He'd returned as a millionaire who'd achieved everything he'd set out to do. But it was only in coming home, in slowing down enough to truly see what was right in front of him, that Owen Fletcher finally understood what it meant to be successful. And it had nothing to do with the numbers in his bank account and everything to do with the woman in his arms and the life they were building together. The past year had taught him that sometimes the best discoveries happen when you stop looking ahead long enough to notice what you've been missing all along. And sometimes, the girl you overlooked in high school becomes the person who teaches you what really matters.